This documentary aims to present a logical view on the use of antibiotics in today's society, as well as the considered opinion of the students Luke Mason and Christian Tallarico, in which it is explored through the presentation provided. We explore primarily the negative effects of using antibiotics as they outweigh the positive uses. It's been years since antibiotics were made in 1928, and since their creation, they have helped us survive for many years onwards, but their usefulness have almost come to an end. Antibiotics were developed to prevent and stop bacteria from spreading to humans to negate their harmful effects that they can have on our bodies. This has also been applied to other life forms, but the use of these antibiotics have created a bigger problem for us to solve today. We've managed to get ourselves into a post-antibiotics age.
Water is not the only way antibiotics get through to our systems. Antibiotics are also transferred to our systems through animals eating food and digesting water throughout nature. This is due to the antibiotics being left in the water and being treated through the sewage systems and coming out back into the waterways. These animals that have eaten the antibiotics are henceforth killed, and obviously we eat them. This allows the antibiotics to not only enter the animals' bodies but also our bodies, which can cause major devastation. Animals are fed the antibiotics to make them stronger and more resistant to disease, but even when slaughtered, their medicine still remains in the meat. And when we consume it, obviously the antibiotics pass on through to our systems. Not only are we ingesting them by pills, but we are also drinking and eating them daily. It is a wonder that we are not breathing them yet, as they are so mass-produced in everything that we eat and consume. Our lives practically depend on the antibiotics to do their jobs, but when the bacteria become so resistant to any form made by man, all of our systems will eventually collapse. There will be nothing left to fight disease on crops, animals, water, plants, food, and ourselves ultimately. Wildlife is also being greatly impacted from the use of antibiotics. Most wildlife does not directly consume the antibiotics, but they contain high levels of resistant bacteria inside them from studies on their feces. Most of the wildlife cannot be treated for the resistant bacteria that can plague them, and now there are high levels of strong bacteria. This impact will grow unnaturally in the deaths of animals.
Antibiotics have been put into use since the 1940s to stop bacteria from completing their processes, such as multiplying. This was hopefully the solution to prevent diseases arising in human population, but from the continuous use we have created something far worse than bacteria. We have created superbugs, bacteria which is now resistant to a variety of antibiotics which become very hard to kill, and ultimately deadly. The theory of evolution from Darwin explains that ultimately the strongest survive and reproduce, meaning the bacteria that survive from the use of antibiotics build up a resistance to the drugs, and then their offspring and other bacteria around them also become resistant. This is known as natural selection. Through this, resistant bacteria have led themselves to becoming one of the biggest threats to countries, alongside terrorism and natural catastrophes. It has also been seen from statistics that 70% of the world's bacteria have developed resistance to antibiotics.
Through the use of antibiotics, there are direct links to the increase in resistant bacteria. The use of antibiotics easily enters the ecosystem in a variety of ways, such as disposing. They enter drinking water through urban waste treatment, and this ends up being back into our bodies through drinking it, without us even knowing about it. This in turn can make us less immune to the bacteria that infects our bodies, and can therefore hurt us in the long run instead of curing us in the short run. This is why bacteria has grown so strongly throughout the past years, because humans are slowly getting resistant to the bacteria in our bodies. As resistant bacteria grow in number, so do the amount and number of diseases. Medicine cannot keep up with the ever-changing and adapting invisible enemy. Bacteria continually changes in their form, and more different strains of diseases become prominent. To discuss and prevent the increase of resistant bacteria to antibiotics, there are a number of measures that have been implemented in today's world. The main way to stop this is with the proper use of antibiotics, which is referred to as antibiotic stewardship. This method essentially aims to show and give guidelines for the correct use and distribution of antibiotics, and to defend against the human body against antibiotics.
Millions of years have gone on this earth, and bacteria have lived on it way before we were the prominent species. We've existed for only several thousand years, and yet we have survived up until our current state without the use of antibiotics. Some say that we need them to survive and thrive, while others state that they are going to lead to our deaths. Relevant to this is that antibiotics not only damage our health, but also our society, such as the economy and the logistics. Since bacteria are becoming more and more resistant to the effects of antibiotics, stronger and more expensive forms need to be produced. Hence, companies do not make as much profit off the production of these antibiotics compared to other drugs that need or can be taken continually, such as diabetes or blood pressure pills. Most can argue that this could be the manufacturer's problem and the ones that have created these monsters, yet it is not their fault but our own. We rely heavily on the antibiotics to do the job instead of our own bodies. More than 60% of the time, we really don't need the drugs to make us better, or are used incorrectly from the narrow and misunderstanding of antibiotics and their functions, such as antibiotics being used to kill living organisms, unlike viruses which are unaffected. As antibiotics have helped us in the years, they have also been a double-edged sword, killing us in the process of helping us. The resistant bacteria have evolved to the point where many antibiotics do not work against them, and we are struggling to deal with their current impacts, as well as looking for new ways to prevent further harm. These bacteria have arisen in ways from the overuse of antibiotics in human medicine, agriculture, and even simple water treatment. The use of antibiotics is everywhere in our lives, and its impacts are starting to not only affect us, but the other living organisms on this planet. This has caused antibiotic resistance to be one of the leading threats to the Earth and its inhabitants. As these bacteria have become harder to kill, companies have struggled to counter their increased resistance, and this has led to only a few manufacturers who produce antibiotics due to the low income from the production. This can also lead to crashes in some economic sectors. As previously stated, it is now currently seen and speculated that we should have never implemented antibiotics into our society, yet without the use of them, we would have many deaths occurred from diseases. Yet this can be contradicted to the long-term effects from the use of antibiotics. It is seen that the antibiotic-resistant strains are much more worse and inflict more death and suffering than the previous forms due to natural selection. The question arises today if we should stop the use of antibiotics. Simply, I consider stopping the use of them as a bad idea to the fact that many deaths and other issues will occur, but from the continuous use of antibiotics now will lead to our own destruction. The answer is to monitor and manage the correct use of antibiotics to stop resistance being built up. If we are unsuccessful, we will be swarmed in a pool of disease and death, and the golden age of medicine will be behind us.